What's going on, everybody? Good to see you once again. It's me, Joel Simmons from the Tenacity Foundation, and the real estate king, Michael Seville, on the other end of the helm. Come on, Mike, what we got going on?
Just admire myself in the camera right now.
Oh man, that's
I
good.
feel
That's
like
good.
I feel I feel like the Lord's light is shining upon me right now. So I'm blessed to be here, brother. I appreciate it. I'm in a good mood. This is dope. I think the series that we're going through, a lot of the conversations that we've been having, in here and outside of here. Of course, you have the group, the gathering, which I put the description. I think the last time that we had it, people, if you are men, rather, if you're wanting to join a group, the brother has an awesome group called the Gathering that we meet because I'm a part of it as well. We've been meeting on Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern time. We've been going over a lot of things, a lot of information. We've been sharing a lot of resources, and there has also been, which I think is very important in this day and age, or probably any day and age, is the support that's being had for it. So, and it's in line with the series we're doing. We're talking about our identity, rebuilding the man. This is the series that we're thinking will probably go on for about 8 weeks or so, but it's like all culminating together. Brother, I don't know if you want to speak to that and let people know how they can join it, or people rather, men. This is a men's group. How they can join it, and your thoughts around it. You put it together, so definitely want to give you your flowers for that.
I definitely appreciate that, Mike. Listen, guys, all you guys out there, if you're watching this, we want you to be a part of this group. As Mike said, there's a lot of men that are there that have expertise as well as experiences, as well as knowledge, as well as simply being ready and able to support one another. And that's really what the group is formulated for. The gathering is based out of a scripture reading from the book of Matthew, chapter 10. And it's all about when two or three are gathered together. And the Lord said he'd be there in the midst. So it's about creating a place where men can come and gather themselves together. And then the prayer is that we be blessed during the course of that discourse to be able to learn of those things that we need to bridge the gaps inside of our lives. So it's about togetherness and consistency. You're welcome to be there. There should be, Mike will probably drop another link down at the bottom, and you can ask to request to join a group. It's on WhatsApp, and we'd love to see you, hear from you. You reach out, we'll reach back out to you. All right.
Awesome, man. So yeah, so check it out. Especially if you don't know, and I'll add this is like if you're in a space where you just kind of you're looking for something, you know what I mean? And this may not necessarily be your last stop on your journey. I'm hoping it's not, but it's definitely a great way to kind of be guided on the path that you're on. So shouts out to the gathering, all the brothers in the gathering. I definitely appreciate you. I definitely learn as much as I attempt to support and provide within that group. So cool. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. It's Friday, probably 6:30, possibly. It's Community Beacon. I'm sure this is when this episode is going up. We did tape this one. We definitely want to get back to the live venues because of the engagement. However, logistics and stuff. You're dealing with some efficient brothers, some brothers that are being very productive. That is our intention and that is our aim, and definitely in alignment. So when you're in alignment and you're being I think productivity just comes along with being in alignment. So I'm seeing that. All right, cool. Let's get into it. Last week we kind of spoke about what we would be talking about, the topics that we would kind of be getting into. This week we will be jumping into the identity topic. I can't be the only one that understands that there's a somewhat of an identity crisis going on in our society today. And so with identity crisis, we start to get into issues of self-esteem. We start to get into issues of self-concept, which may lead into belief or disbelief, not being faithful. Well, essentially, just not being sure about yourself. And so, and because people kind of don't know what to do. We're talking about gender roles in society. We're talking about XX and O, brother. So I don't even know where we want to start here. I do know I want to get this out of the way real quickly. Uh, and I even texted you earlier. I said, look, biology. I'm talking about people who are born men and people who are born women specifically. Everything else, I'm not gonna get into it. But that's it. If you were born a man biologically, meaning that you had the equipment that males have, you had the chromosomes that males had, and definitely with women, yeah, you were born with the equipment that women have, and you got the chromosomes. I think what is it? Women are XX and men are XY. So take it from there. I don't know, brother. Can we glaze over it that quickly? Does that sufficient for you?
You know what? I'm liking it. I'm liking the way we're moving because I believe that that has a whole lot to deal with identity. I
Hmm.
believe that there is an identity crisis. And this is coming from a male's perspective. Again, we notate that it is a good idea for ladies to watch these videos. Why? Because you're getting the opportunity to hear two different men speak about where they're coming from and how they view the world, how they view themselves. And I think that that's a very good starting place is to actually ask the questions and hear out the answers versus simply reacting to whatever you see, hear, or think. Nonetheless, self esteem, first part of identity. A definition states self esteem as being how we value and perceive ourselves. That, I believe, is hitting home when we start talking about chromosomes and the package that we were delivered with. When it comes down to self identity, I feel like there is a separation because there is a thought that as I grow older, I can choose whatever identity I associate myself with based off of what? Based off of beliefs, based off of constructs, based off of environment, based off of dogma or knowledge, based off of what? There's certain parts of us, I believe, that stand for themselves. I believe that as the person is born, again, if you go back to last episode, I stated we're not like a giraffe, we're not like a zebra. Simply live birth, and after a certain amount of time, we're walking, we're eating, we're joining the herd, and we're moving on with life because instinctually we know exactly what to do. It's not that way with human beings. Human beings, when we are born into this world, we barely know how to lift up our head. Sometimes we don't even know how to speak. All these things are learned attributes. Now, I know that there's a crisis. I'll call it a crisis. I suppose when the millions of likes come through, somebody will go back through this tape and they'll probably argue that. But nonetheless, I'll call it a crisis, an identity crisis. From a male's perspective, the thing that I believe we're discussing is I'm a man. I was born a man. I am a man. Now, what is a man seems to be changing in front of my eyesight. My self-esteem is based off of what? I don't have self-esteem when I'm born. I don't have the ability to understand my own perception of myself. I don't know what the value of myself is. I don't understand those things. So what do I understand? I understand my mama, I understand my dad, and I understand the people, places, and environments that they place me into. And I build my construct of who I am based off of external information. It's all about what is coming my way. Is there something in my chromosome that may be growing inside of me? I'm sure there is, because there are a lot of things that are passed on through heredity. There's a lot of things, according to science, that comes through. You can become an alcoholic or an addict through your chromosomes. You can be passed down disease like diabetes, or you can become an individual who is depressed or has ADHD. Once again, those are like labels, right? Who's to say, how many people were labeled and they ended up being a genius? They ended up being a genius, but because there wasn't a label, there wasn't a construct developed at the time that they were born or at the time that they reached that level of being genius, they got lumped in with people who have Asperger's or somebody who has some other type of discourse or identification cue that they utilize. Who's to say they're just not a genius and they see the world from a different perspective? But now they have to be lumped in together because of what they produce inside of the world. I don't believe that. I believe that we're born a certain way and then we grow from there. There's a lot of things that we are taught. As a man, if a man's not in your household to teach you how to be a man, can you still become a man? Well, you are already a man. You're already a man. Whether you're this type of man or that type of man, you are already a man. So I want to start there, Mike. I like how you brought into biology, and I'm sorry, man, I had to open that door up because I feel like that is a very, very good starting point when it comes down to identity, because this is a crisis right now. We're not just talking about, I don't know who I am anymore. We're talking about actually putting action steps and choosing to be whatever it is. I've looked up some of this stuff and I've seen people are becoming snakes. They're becoming dogs. It's not just about a man becoming a female anymore. There's an identity crisis when they become furries. How do we get here?
All right, I'm going to get completely serious, but I'd like to make the distinction first off. I think because I think it's very important, because we did start off with biology. I want to make the distinction between being born a male and being a man. In our society today, when does a person exactly become a man? And I think we have to do that because you're born male, and as being a male, now that's the starting criteria of being a boy, and then you're a boy, and then hopefully, you would mature into a man. I think there's a maturity thing there, maturity versus immaturity, and there's a connection versus disconnection thing there. And really, when I look at most things, it all comes down to that. When does a person become a man? Now, in the Jewish faith, we will see it's, what is it, 13 or 14 is when they have the bar mitzvah. There's normally like an initiation. However, within our culture, there was never an initiation as far as to when a person becomes a quote unquote man. It can't be when the person is able to reproduce, because we have you, you're gonna have to. There's a lot of boys that have reproduced. Okay, it can't be when you turn 18, because there's a lot of people who reach the ages of 18 and they still have the immature ways. So becoming a man, or building upon one, or seeing it, first off, we got to see, like, what is the model like? So how are we modeling like what a man looks like, specifically since most of us didn't really go through this initiation of phase. We weren't sent out and we had to come back. The old Spartans used to be sent out and had to, into the wilderness and kill a beast or something. I think a couple of African nations also do that as well. Like I said, in the Jewish faith, they have what they call a bar mitzvah, which is, now it seems more symbolic and traditional, versus saying now you are a man. Because even at the age of 13, I want to say it's 13. I went to my friends and I think I was around 12 at the time. I know we were like in the 8th grade or something. So that's the time of it. So what exactly, let's like really define, versus the biological being born a male, which I'm going to say is one of the criteria into being a man. And then we can say, well, what would we consider a mature man? Like, what does that look like? And where can we get that information? I think there's a certain criteria of just becoming a man. One is, I would say, is responsibility. I think I believe a man has to be able to take responsibility. If you cannot take responsibility for whatever it is, and I'm not telling you what that looks like, but it has to be a part of your nature and becoming a man. It has to be a responsibility. Um, Brother, you could jump in at any point in time, but I definitely wanted to make that distinction. So I would say responsibility is one. What other things are you thinking about, brother?
So I like where we're headed with this. I do, as far as being a man, because I mean, just by definition, that's one of the reasons that a male is called a man. It's because he has become mature. When he reaches the age of maturity, and responsibility is definitely a sign of maturity. However, there's one factor in that. Is every man isn't mature, and every man isn't responsible. So
Then
what
I then I would
inhibits
say
them
that that's not
from being?
that's not a man. A man, a
I,
man.
I'm feeling.
Yeah, a man. We can't just identify a man as being, when you turn 18, you're a man. There's certain things that are inherent in manhood, in regards to, and you become a man. So what does that look like? What does it take to become a man? It can't just say, well, I'm not going to say you. It can't just be based on age. We can say legally, as far as the law is concerned. So if we want to do that, then that's fine. But as far as rebuilding a man, there's people who are 30, 40, and I've seen 50-year-old boys, essentially, because they don't take responsibility. They don't. So I would say that we need to put some type of characteristics on what a man looks like.
I love that, and I think that that's the key. That's the key right there. It's from the standpoint of, if I were to build a man, what would I put into him? So what are the ingredients? What are the
Right.
ingredients? Responsibility. I agree with that. Maturity. I agree with that. Strength. I agree with that. Compassion. I agree with that. Creativeness. Yes. Confidence. Yes. Here's the concern with all of these things. So, like, if I were to build a man, this is my thought process on what I would be building. But I think that if we were to just model it after God, then it will be simple. We will just go back to the book of Genesis, and we will just read in there.
That's what I
At the
want to hear.
creation of man,
Yep.
Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. I'll read it. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have domain over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creepy thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So that's where I would derive my definition from, is God created man in the image of God. And the only thing that we know about God at this point in time, by the 26th verse of the book of Genesis, is that God was a creator. God was a worker. God took pride in what he had done, because he named everything. He reviewed the types of things that he had done, because he gave his own opinion. He said that was good.
I'm
Then,
this. Now I cut you off, brother. Go ahead because
I want to hear this. I want to hear this coming out. I saw the look on your face. Don't delay.
This is the conversations that like we have to have, because these conversations are not being had. And just that part of it where you say, and he said that was good. Well, who determines whether it was good? God determined that it was good. There's too many, just in the conversation we're having, there's too many things. We're hearing too many voices of people saying what a man is. Oh, man needs to be doing this, needs to provide, and in the way that they think that it needs to be provided, because there's a whole other definition there. Like, what exactly does it mean to provide? Oh, man needs to lead. Well, what exactly does it mean for a man to lead? If especially if we've never seen it before, we're told what it is, and we have to know what it is as we're becoming a man. You start to know these things. A man needs to protect. Well, let me ask you a question. If this man protected you from 20 when he was the strongest he could be in his 20s, when he is 80 or 90, does that stop him from being a man? That's not the case, because my grandfather probably, when he definitely was protected when it was time to protect. I've heard stories, but when he became 80 or 90, he also matured and he grew. So now his protection was a little bit different. His protection came through words. Hey, you don't fight your cousin. My cousin punched me in the eye one time, and I was plotting on her. Shouts out to Susie. She punched me dead in the face, and I deserved it too. But it didn't stop me from saying, "Oh, I'm gonna get her back." And when he seen it in my face, like oh yeah, Mike is thinking about how he's gonna get her back. He brought us to the side and he said, "You all don't fight. You all are family." And just from that, I've never forgotten that. I had to be 8 or 9 years old when that conversation was had. But this is how he protected. This is the part of protection. It was part of the sharing of information. It's a part of the wisdom, which is a part of the provision. However, these things, because you don't stop becoming a man. However, we need to sit back as men and say, this is what a man is. And it has nothing to do with the ways of the world and what the world gave us. It has nothing to do with having $100,000. It has nothing to do with being able to beat everybody up on the street that I cross paths with. Or it has nothing to do with me telling my wife or my wife, as a dictator, this is how it is and this is how it goes. Because if we continue down and we look at the book, we look at Jesus, who I would say that, we would all want to emulate as well, since he was God in the world. And it talks about Jesus having compassion, which you named. And I love that when we were talking about the criteria and becoming a man. Like this, and I feel it. This is the conversations that need to be had, because guess what? We haven't been having these conversations. We kind of spoke about, and I'm going to get into it. I'm going to brush on it, but this is very important. This is very important. It's been around 60 years in our culture, and one of the biggest exports of our culture is marketing and media and propaganda. It's been a long time since men have really been in the house for a lot of people. Right now, 70 to 75% of households, of kids being born are born to single parents. So it was at 70. Up in around 1950, 1960, Black people were married at the rate of 90%. That's It was 90 kids, 90% of people were married and were having kids within households. That has gotten down to 25, I think it's 25, 20 to 25% at this point in time. So now these men are a man is no longer in the household. So what are we modeling this off of? Well, just like you said, brother, we're being given these things of what it's supposed to look like. Oh, this is and I was one of them. I remember sitting. And the funny thing is, I found one of my notebooks a long time ago talking about how I was raised, and I had strong men there, but they weren't there all the time. My father wasn't in the household for a majority of the time that I was growing up. Thank God I had uncles. Thank God, but the father being there makes a difference because my father's a very powerful man. When he speaks and what he knows, it's amazing to sit down there, sit underneath him and listen. But then luckily, up until a certain age, I had my grandfather who was there and he also instilled it. So I've had a line, but there was that time when we have no choice but to see, music. So you start to see, the crack epidemic. So you start to see a lot of crazy things going on within the neighborhood. Start to see a lot of images that are produced and propagated throughout, and we start to develop into this culture. But for 60 years, so now even not only do the women not have it now, but they weren't there. We're about 3-4 generations in. So now we have to sit back and say, well, what does it look like? Because if you also start to see when the men come out of there, which is the nature, when you start to go against the nature of not having a man in the household, we start to see these things. This is the reason why these conversations have to be had, because what does it look like? Because if now this is going to go into your self-esteem, if you're being saying that this is what it's supposed to look like, imagine how you go about life if you're not exactly meeting these so-called needs. If you're not a
Yes.
man, if you're not a man making what the culture tells you, you're supposed to make $100,000 what is it, $100,000 a year. If you're not 6 feet, if you're not like all these different things that need to come along with it, come along with so-called being a man. And then when you look at the numbers, when you actually look at the numbers, what an average black man makes $50,000 a year. So right there, you're halfway, you're halfway short. This is why when you're 18, 19, and 20, you think you need to be a millionaire. You got a lot of kids and you don't think you need to work hard. Like how then when you start to see how much work it takes in order to get it, and you get dejected because you're making $15, now you start to look at different ways of making it. Well, shoot, I gotta do something to get it. Like, what are my options? And then you start to put yourself in the corner. This has to do with self-esteem. And with the self-esteem thing is people telling you, oh, you ain't nothing because you're not making 100,000. Well, crap, nobody make it. If you look at the numbers, I want to say is, oh my gosh, please, 10% of black men make over $75,000 a year. I want to say that's the number. Don't quote me on it, but it's very, very close to it. So if other people are telling you that because you're not supposedly living up to these made up numbers, because we don't know where it came from. You're not a superstar. You're not a celebrity. You're not these athletes that are getting idolized. You're not this. Imagine what it does to your self-esteem because you're basing it on what's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do that. No, we need to figure out exactly what it is so that you can have a stable and a self-concept and identity. This is where the rebuilding of the man comes in, because we have to break all of this stuff down. We got to break down like this a lot of these things that aren't necessarily true. I remember I was 18. No, I was in high school. Yeah, I was in high school. And I said, oh, this is before 50 Cent, but it was like, I need to get rich or die trying. Oh, by the time I hit 25, I need to have a 550 Benz. And by the time I'm 30, I've seen, so, and I did a lot. Don't get me wrong. I did end up being very successful in everything it was that I did. However, I didn't have that 550 Benz. I did end up getting the Cadillac Escalade, but I didn't need it. I shouldn't have took on that as well. Just thinking back on it, these are some of the things that you're like, well, man, I'm sitting here paying I don't know at the time. a $700 or $800 car note at the time at 25, 26. For what? Oh, because I'm supposed to, according to this narrative, I'm supposed to have these things.
Mm.
So now I'm doing this, and again, brother, you in insurance. Imagine me taking that same $700, $800 car note and putting it towards a whole life policy. Like, imagine where I'm at in 5 years versus and protected versus putting it into an asset that depreciates. Then imagine the amount of self-worth that I'm attaching to these assets. You got some people that say, listen, if I'm not driving this, then I don't even want to I don't even want to go out in public. I don't want to be seen. And the amount of shame and guilt people are walking around with because they believe it's supposed to be pointed in you're supposed to be a certain kind of way. This is why it's important to have because once you start to understand and get a strong self concept of self, based on some real principles, not some stuff that we're making up. This is not time spent of us just thinking about these things. These are time spent of us actually getting into it with the understanding and the knowing and saying, wait a minute, this kind of doesn't make no sense. Let's go back to see what, and you went to Genesis 1 verse 26. Let's see what God said. Well, God said I was made in his image. So right then and there, that means I'm more than something. My worth is something because I'm made in the image of God. You got to get you sometime. You got to. And now when you go out into the world, I don't care if you walk into the bus. I don't care if you, whatever it is that you attempt to do, if you know that you're made in the image of your creator, you are that's an empowering thought. So this is why we gotta look at what it's like. And this is going to be tough for a lot of us. We got to say, man, what are we modeling ourselves off of? How do we get these images? How do we prop up? And I love, not as much as I used to, but I love basketball. I love football. I came around, but how are we comparing ourselves to these? And when you really get to thinking about it, how are these people getting paid these hundreds of millions of dollars, and the teachers who are teaching our kids these same things are getting paid 30 to 35,000 to start off? But these other people getting paid $100 million when these people are supposed to be our future. That's a whole different episode. But but how can we prop up a very significant, a very small percentage of people, these less than half a percent, that are making these hundreds of millions of dollars, and even they can deal with some type of self-esteem and self-concept when you find out that 7 years later that all of these people are broke because of what they're basing their self-esteem and self-concept off of. But how do we get there? Okay, that's my rant, but I'm gonna tell you how we get there. We already said we're gonna tell you to seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, because everything's gonna come along with that. And we're also and so keep that in the back of your mind, because as we continue to move forward, just make that a presupposition. I think, brother. Let's set that as one of the ground rules. A presupposition is that you're going to seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. So you get a chance to delve into that. So that's a presupposition. I'm not going to say too much about it in regards to bringing it up all the time. The next is, while getting the everything, we're going to get ourselves some understanding. So now we're going to get ourselves some understanding. So keep those two things on the back burner as we go along in this series, because it's very important. Then we're going to see, like, what was and that's what the brothers really going to dive deep into. We're going to figure out, like, what was given to us, like what were we told to do. The brother kind of spoke on that, being fruitful and multiply. What were some of our first instructions as far as becoming a man? I also want to say, as a presupposition, kind of like a ground rule. And it was interesting because I had this conversation with my cousin recently. I said, we're going to talk about my grandfather. We were having a conversation. He spent a lot more time with him than I did, because my grandfather ended up going back to Jamaica, and he said he ain't coming back. Yeah, he said, I'm not coming back to America. It's a funny story. I let my dad tell the story. Is that they were all on a flight together. Imagine this. They all on a flight. The brothers and my grandfather on the flight. They're coming from Jersey to Florida. He ended up spending about a month and a half in Florida before he went to Jamaica. But on the trip, on the flight, I believe they had some type of malfunctioning with the plane. And they all said they looked over at their father. Come on, that's a beautiful thing. They looked over at their father because even as they had to be in their 30s at this point. But even as 30-year-olds, they got a chance to look over at their father because he's the father. And they looked over at him, they seen him panicking. And he said when the plane finally landed, he said, "Man, I'm never coming back." He said, "I got one more plane ride to go, and I'm never getting on the plane again." And he did it. He jumped on that plane, and he never came back to America. But long story short, as we were speaking about my grandfather, we were talking about leadership. Now, my grandfather probably didn't make the most amount of money between him and my grandma. My grandma was a very loving, I mean, just everything that a person could want in a woman as far as what she did for her family and people outside of the family. Like, just it's a lot of people in America that are here because she's here, and just the love and compassion she had for her legacy, because she put her thing into the legacy. But I said, as we speak about that, and we speak about my grandfather, and I want, if the women are watching this, men are watching this, because I'm bigging up the male, or I'm showing what the male is, what we deem the male is to be responsible for, and how to become empowering as far as becoming a man. That does not diminish what's going on with the women. So I want us to completely understand that, because sometimes it's like, well, if you big up this, then that means something's being taken away here. But if you big up this woman, that means it makes this person less of a man. It doesn't. It just makes this a well-rounded situation. It just means that I'm not taking away from anything, because it all needs to be complete in order for it to be whole. So I can't make one whole bigger than the other. It's not. It's the same thing. It's one. So just believe there's no competition. There's no comparing. There's no better. There's no worse. There just is. And if we can understand that, now all of a sudden we can take this to a bigger level. So the rebuilding of the man is not to say that this woman, something's wrong with the woman, or something's wrong with, because truth be told, we're all complicit in this thing. We're all complicit in the separation. So as long as we take responsibility for that, and not to say that I'm taking responsibility because I'm better than you, or you're not as mature as me, because women have shown that they can go out there, they can make the money, they can take care of their kids, they can raise kids, they can do all these different things that a man can do. And it doesn't take away from you being a man, but they can do all these things. They can be whatever it is. However, let's talk about making this a fruitful situation. Let's talk about multiplying, because addition is great, but multiplying is even better, right? Like, we're talking about a synergy and a synergistic thing. So, brother, I know I'm going off on it. Definitely want to make sure that we're all good with these presuppositions, and I'm not forcing anything on you that you don't necessarily agree or align with.
No, I'm loving it, man. I'm sitting here taking down these notes because I love it when you get heated up and you begin to fire off like that, because I know that's a very passionate place that you're coming from. And you know me, I'm 100% into being passionate about something. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that discourse. I really did, and I love that you went to that. I think you were quoting Matthew chapter 6:33, when he started talking about seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all his righteousness, and all other things will be added unto you. I love that. I love that. I think that makes all of the difference. When I think about where I came from and how I got to where I am, my limited belief and my lack of mentality caused me to go down a pathway where I always felt like I don't have enough. It's not enough there. That was my mindset. I was always seeking how to be accepted, seeking how to be in the environment where people are doing well, or where they appear to be doing well. And I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine, Elder Jones. This is about 25 years ago. We had this conversation. We were in our place of worship in the foyer, looking out those doors. And we started to talk about the different trials that we were going through. And we looked at each other, and this is funny. He is about 25 years older than me. And we looked at each other and we said, man, God will make a man out of you. And I laughed because we were speaking about the things that we were going through. I mean, we were going through some trials, and maybe he was a little bit more of a late bloomer in the essence of what we're discussing. Not that he wasn't a man by man's definition, if that makes sense, but that him and I were going through this time in our life where we had to deal with our circumstances differently. There's no more hiding. There was no more running. There was no more fighting simply because we were in disagreement or misaligned. No, we had to work things.
Uh-oh.
We had to work things out. That's what we had to do. We had to figure out a way on how we will work things out for the good. And this was an interesting place inside of our life. This was something new. And I'll never forget looking at him and him looking at me, and we just sat there and laughed. Like, God will make a man out of you. What does that mean? When I go back and I think about that, what on earth does that mean? I believe that for me, it meant I needed to take care of what I have. I needed to, when we started talking about those first few things that God was looking for, that domain or dominion to rule over, I needed to start understanding what exactly that means. And I love, Mike, that you're talking about this perspective of how, I love it. You went to this comparison competition. You didn't use those words, but you started to talk about the comparison and the competition between a male and a female. And I thought about that because that became a huge challenge for me in my life since I was nothing but a boy. And this is me saying that, or a little man, but I was someone who was not mature, who had not exercised domain or had not exercised kingdomship or had not exercised responsibilities at a high level. I didn't know what it felt like to take care of a woman. I didn't know what it felt like to take care of a grandparent. I didn't know what it felt like to take care of children. I didn't know what it felt like to maintain work, to be a provider. I didn't know what does this look like? What am I supposed to look like? What am I supposed to walk like? What am I supposed to model? Who do I model? And when I model them, at what phase was I modeling them at? I found some men to model. I looked at some men. I said, I like that. I like that. Yep. I like that. Yep. Those men, they look like they're men. They're taking care of their wives. They're taking care of their children. They're taking care. They love God. They go to work. They're providing for their families. Okay, that must be what men do because I'm fresh off the streets.
Right.
So I have no idea what this looks like. Oh, they wear ties? Let me put a tie on. They wear jackets? Let me put a jacket on. They wear slacks, not jeans? Let me put slacks on. There was a time where I didn't even wear jeans for years. They don't wear shorts. I didn't wear shorts for years. I didn't wear sneakers for years unless I was going to the basketball court. You couldn't catch me with those types of clothing on. And when I would dress down, it was in slacks and a polo. Talk about identity crisis. This is me navigating from wearing baggy clothes with my pants hanging down, white t-shirts, sneakers, smelling like smoke. So now I need to have cologne, I need to have a suit, I need to have slacks, I need to have Stacy Adams or some type of dress shoe. And I guess I wear it everywhere I go because the only place that I see these men at, that's the way they look. So maybe they look like that everywhere. And I truly believe that this is a part of it. Remember when I was referring to the zebra and the giraffe, because I take that very seriously. When a giraffe comes out, the giraffe instinctively knows certain things to do and who to be around. But when a human is born, a human has no idea. And it is external influences that influence the majority of what that child will end up becoming. There's one scripture that says, train up a child in the way that they should go. I think it's Proverbs 23:7. I'll double check it. But train up a child in the way they should go so when they're older, they won't depart. And it's like, I get it. There's got to be some type of input into these individuals. So I feel as if because there is a diverse way of thought and thinking, and because of the environmental constructs that we're all developing or that we're all developed underneath, whichever ones those are, that there is a difference between man's thought process of what a man looks like and is versus, as you just alluded to, Mike, and as I agree with, what God said. And I think that it's a benefit to you and I that we have the good book to go to. We've got God to go to. We've got a baseline of where we can start. And whenever we get skewed or we get off or out of the way, we can go back and resort to those things that we learned of or those things that we haven't learned of. And we can use that as a baseline for whom we are. I think that's helpful. There's another scripture. I just thought about it while I was, I believe that was in the book of Amos. I'm gonna find it, Mike. Go ahead. Let me find this scripture because I just thought about.
You're gonna talk about the plumb line.
Yeah,
It's good. It's good that we have something that's the ruling guide. His brother's gonna talk about the plumb line that he set. I want to reiterate because you mentioned about a lot of the things that you did as you were coming up, as far as a man is concerned. This is I want us all to come with an open mind. There's a saying that children mimic what they see and repeat what they hear. Children mimic what they see and they repeat what they hear. When this is why when a man is taken out of a household, we spend a lot of our life, and some people spend their entire life attempting to mimic something that, as far as what they believe a man should do. And that comes from what we see. Oh, I think, initially, me coming up initially was like, oh, here I thought they were grown men. These are like 20 to 25-year-olds in the neighborhood. Oh, this is what I'm supposed to look like. This is the baggy clothes and the t-shirts. This is what a man. This is what I'm looking around. This is what these people that seem to be admired. This is what they're wearing. And then I got to a stage where it was about, oh, I see everybody in suits, just like you, brother. So, hey, man, I need to go grab me some suits. I need to go grab me this, like, because these other men that I'm turning around and I'm looking and I'm starting to see what it is that they are, exactly what are they doing. I'm just trying to get some understanding. I'm trying to get some knowledge. I'm trying to see what it is. Just seems like this is what it's supposed to do. The TV is telling me this is what it's supposed to do. It's so on and etc. This is where we start to see some what I would call like hyper masculine energy, where it becomes hyper masculine because now I'm starting to do things that I think is what a man is supposed to do. So you start to see some hyper, especially in our day and age, hyper sexualization, hyper, what they call they call it toxic masculinity. I don't believe it because if you got toxic masculinity, then you got to have toxic femininity, which would be the opposite of that, right? So I'm curious to know what that looks like, but no one has quite explained toxic toxic femininity to me, so I'm going to refuse to believe toxic masculinity. I will say that there is hyper. You can be hyper masculinized just like you can be hyper feminized.
Mm.
Until we sit back and because it's already been given to us. I want us to say, I want us to take a step back and we have to say, because it's not what we're wearing. The man is, it's not on you, it's in you. The issue comes with the self-esteem part, etc. Is this is when you're not really understand if you have low self-esteem, as they call it, it becomes a second guessing. You're not thinking on your what I would call your God mind or your first mind. You start to second guess yourself, and that's just the way of the world because people tend to project their insecurities on you. So they see you doing something, they don't know, and 99% of the time they don't know what they're doing. It's just it might just be a look. Oh, what? I tried it, and you sure that's what you want to do? But so on and so forth. It's more important for you to get. I believe it's going to be more important for you to get as far as it is the values. Because once you start to understand what your values are as a man, and you got to sit back, and this is kind of where we're going to lead into this thing is, and this is what we want to provide it. You got to start to understand your values, a man. You got to start to understand like what you need to start defining on what that looks like to you, and then we just get as close into alignment as possible. Thank God we got, and the brother gonna say the verse, but and I think a lot of these sacred texts have it. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm using the Bible. You got to go to that ruling guide and start to say, okay, well, what do my values lie? Why am I kind of veering off this path? Because anytime you veer away from your values, anytime that you violate your values, you start to go down a certain kind of path. When you start to do things that you value, you start to go against it. Like I'll give an example. If compassion is a high value for you, if compassion in a relationship is the context, is of high importance to you as a person, and you start to not be compassionate or not think compassionately, you're always going to second guess yourself. You're not going to be in alignment with yourself. How much time we got? It's 52 minutes. I think it's very important for us to start to, and that this may be a good start. Like we need to and this is 8 weeks, and you might take the next 6 months to a year to figure this stuff out. You could. I don't really like to put a time on it. I think things are more so about focus and effort than it is about time, because you can actually get it done. Or Grant Cardone wrote his book 10x on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. And this is like one of the biggest largest, most selling business books ever. He wrote it in the afternoon. But if you sit with some focus and effort and start to line out, okay, listen, what do I value? Okay, compassion. Okay, well, let's look at the model of compassion. Just we're just gonna take this. I think the brother Joel is very compassionate. Well, how does he exhibit his compassion? Since you say the brother Joel is very compassionate. Oh well, when I talk to him, he listens. Not only does he listen, but he actively listens. He asked me questions. I feel like that's an awesome way to exemplify compassion. All right, cool. So now I get to take that and I start to put that into my definition of compassion, because to me, compassion is important. Well, let me ask you a question. Are you compassionate with yourself? I don't know, Mike. You like to wake up when you don't want to wake up. You like to go the extra mile when you probably don't need to go the extra mile. You don't want to rest yourself. You don't want to self-care, no nothing. Well, then how can you be compassionate? You don't have it for yourself. So what ends up happening is if you don't have this compassion value for yourself and you value compassion, right there you're sinning against yourself. Now, how do you exhibit it with somebody else? Because if you don't have it for yourself, how are you going to do it for somebody else? It's going to be very hard for you to do it for somebody else because you can't do it for yourself. What ends up happening is you end up, and always be careful when you hear this word, you end up overdoing it. You end up not allowing people their journey. You end up wanting to control more than you want to guide. You end up giving advice versus giving information. It ends up being ultimately codependency. It's like, because I need these people to do it this way. This way I always got advice for somebody else. I don't have it for myself. I'm not following my own advice. Pay attention to people who don't follow their own advice. So how can I? So now okay, and that's fine because we've all done it because we're taught this way. We learned it some kind of way. We saw it on TV, whatever it is. Well, however it happened. I had a conversation with somebody earlier, and I'm just looking. She's like, she just said, I just be doing. I'm like, you got to take. In my mind, I'm saying you got to take time for yourself. So now we've defined it. Now we get a chance to look at how we're going to exhibit within ourselves. And this is where disconnect happens because a lot of people don't have it in, like they feel like they sin it against somebody else because they taking out time for yourself. I'm going to tell you this as a man, if it's not right with you, it's not right. If you are not right, it's going to be hard for you to fix or do anything on the thing and not resent people, because now that'll lead to resentment. Oh well, I gave my last dollar to this person, and you need to go feed your family. That's not being compassionate. That's not being
responsible.
It's not being responsible. But you being guilted and shamed, and I wish we could put up that my chart I always use. You being guilted and shamed to give in your last to give someone your dollar, and they get upset with you because you don't. If you want to see if somebody on your side, tell them no. That's what I heard somebody say before. You being guilted and shamed in regards to this dollar, and you give it up and you don't have time, you can't feed yourself, you can't feed your family. Well, then how are you going to have the strength to continue doing what it is that you're going to be doing over and over again? You got to have compassion on yourself first. If it's not right, and it's not selfish, this is being self-centered. You're starting to center yourself. You're starting to align yourself. This is what this whole thing is about. And then the more that you put this into yourself, I'm gonna cut after this one. The more that you continue to put into yourself, you start to guess what happens now when you start to put it into yourself. And I'm just on this one value of compassion, but then it leads to something else, which is kind of similar, higher value. Is you start to trust in yourself, because I'm gonna tell you this: if you don't have no trust in yourself, that self-esteem is going down the drain. But all these things start to connect. So so now you're starting to look at trust. Man, I'm starting to feel a way about myself, because guess what? I'm not giving my last, and I say $1, but it's a symbol of what are you giving? Is you giving your energy to somebody? So now when you get home, you don't have the energy for your family, or your family. Are you giving your mom used to say your last nerve? You giving your last nerve to somebody? Now when you go home, your child say, just do the simplest thing, and you're going off on them. You're blowing up on them, and they trying to figure out, you look good in the world. You look good in the world, and then you come back and you're not good in your family, and they're not even, you're not good with yourself. So now you're wrestling. You're getting up at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with anxiety and trying to figure out, well, I can't. I'm just not, because you're not good with yourself, but it's because you're violating these values. But how much time are we taking? This is what this series is about. How much time are we taking to start to develop these things? Me and the brother gonna be okay, because I know the brother's studying because we have conversations about studying and et cetera, and we get to come, and I know I'm doing it. A lot of this stuff is not happening by just happenstance. Oh, these brothers just got on the thing and just started talking. There's a lot that goes behind it. However, we're attempting to give you a blueprint for you to start to create these different things, but you got to come with your whole mind. All right, I did say I was going to stop. I'm running off at the mouth, brother.
No, I feel that. I feel it. I feel the whole thing, and I think it's well. I think it was well stated. That just a little correction on my behalf. It was Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child.
Yeah, I got that. I meant to tell you that. I looked it up.
So the other scripture was Amos 7:7, and it said 7:8. And the Lord said unto me, Amos, what seest thou? And I said, a plumb line. Then said the Lord, behold, I will set a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. I will not again pass by them anymore.
Explain that, please. Yeah.
The plumb line stands for a standard. That's what it is. When you utilize the plumb line, you use it inside of a house. For those of y'all that build houses out there, you'll probably understand this really well. I've actually seen a plumb line being used to set up a cheeky, and they take the plumb line, and a plumb line is a level. So just like you will put a level onto something that is horizontal, how do you level something that is vertical? So they have made levelers that can level something that is vertical by changing the way that it balances. But a plumb line is what you would use to make a vertical level. And it's a device that has a string, and it has like a weight at the bottom. And so you can check to see if it's level going upwards, vertical. So a standard that God was talking about, putting a standard in the midst of the people, a human being in the midst of the people, so that all people could check their values against that individual. For instance, Jesus, who was born, who was given a body so that he could dwell among men, and so that men would know, okay, this is the new standard that I need to live by, or this is the standard, but now that I can see it, it's a lot easier for me to follow after what I see. And bro, you were putting all of that out, which is, I absolutely loved it, because you started talking about the same type of thing, about being able to see and how you adjusted and adjusted and adjusted. When we start talking about building a man, then we're talking about going from a childbirth to a little man or a boy, all the way into young adulthood, to be established as a mature individual with the ability to uphold his responsibilities within society, right? With the package and all. He was born that way. He's living that way. And now he is acting in accordance. He's walking in his design. And I thought about that because when you start to talk about self-esteem, it's like, well, how do I accomplish having that type of self-esteem, or having confidence that I am who I am and that I'm right as I am? And you started to allude to it. And these scriptures that we just talked about, they allude to it too. Training up a child means to teach them. I think I was in the book of Deuteronomy, maybe at the 8th chapter, 6th verse. It's right around there, where it talks about your children and how you're supposed to talk about the word with them as they come in and as they go out. This is one of those things that is so necessary to train these children into becoming who they are designed to be. If you train a child to be a king, if you train them to be a king, the time that they become mature, they will walk like and talk like a king, unless they simply rebel. If you train a child to be a beggar, they will become probably the best beggar that is ever known to mankind. I met a beggar one day. I met one. As a matter of fact, as I had skipped my in-school suspension from school and I was walking home, a man, a young lady who I went to school with, who was in trouble also, her father stopped by the side of the road and picked me up in a brand new Saab. I jumped in the Saab and I started looking at the driver like, hey, I know you. I've seen you before. I didn't say anything because I'm sitting in the back seat of this Saab, but I'm like, I know this man. The next day when I went to school, I spoke to that young lady. I was like, I've seen your dad before. She's like, yeah, I know. Huh? What you mean?
What's going on?
Yeah, I seen him off on, I named the street, dot, dot, dot. It was Bethel Highway, Virginia. And she said, yeah, I know. So yeah, that's what he does. He was a beggar. He was a bum on the side of the street.
Mm.
His house was huge, 2-story home, had a big patio that spanned from one end of the house to the other end of the house. Driving a brand new Saab with a garage that went under a carport all the way into the backyard with a shed. I'm talking about white picket fence all the way around, and the grass was one of the best looking grass on the entire street. This man was not starving for money. He was good at requesting money from other people. And I guess when he washed his face off and took those ratty clothes off, he jumped into his Saab and drove home. So what I'm getting at is that whatever we put into young men is what we will get out of them. At some point in time, we become old enough. Brother, you was mentioning it when you started talking about the bar mitzvah, or you started talking about some of the African cultures where there's something that they have to do. In one of the Indian cultures, they have to scratch themselves, and this is a sign of manhood. Maybe inside of someone's culture, for a woman, it may be the passing of the flower. For a young man, it may be when his testosterone truly kicks in and he begins to get internal urges, or hair grows underneath their armpits and on their face. These different things are signs that there is a change, a physiological change inside of the body. But if we haven't trained, if we haven't put into those individuals, if we didn't put into that little man what it takes to become a man, then he is still searching. And just like a computer program, when you purchase a computer, it has certain things that come in the package. But if you design to be a graphic designer, you have to input the information to make that computer be able to use and access the designs and the programs that are necessary to be the best graphic designer. If not, you're sitting there using Paint It or something like that, some rudimentary thing that does not have the capacity to be able to fulfill the requirement that is necessary for you to do the work that is within inside or ingrained inside of you. So there is a passing of knowledge, of information, both visual and audio. And we have to put that in there. So self-esteem is something that can be learned. It's something that can be taught. I began to develop my self-esteem ladder in the latter point in my life. My mother did all she could to develop it, but then it wasn't until I got around men and I began to pick and choose. I began to pull the fruit from their trees to see what I believe tasted right for me. And the scripture would teach us, taste and see that the Lord is good. So I began to taste to see, I do like this, Lord. Oh my goodness, who else is walking with you? Because I need a little more of that. I like the way he walks. So I began to change my walk, my adaptation to walk a certain way. Why? Because the man that I believe was living the style of life that I wanted to live walked that way. So I walked that way and I began to talk that way until I could design or find myself in myself and be comfortable with myself, which is the point that I'm at now, or at least I'm 95, 98% there, because I know that there's always a thought about, and I have to go back and I say, okay, is that me or is that somebody else? That's somebody else? Okay, let me go back. Let me talk to my God one more time and make sure that I'm being me, because I feel like as much as we find ourselves, we need to hold ourselves. And that could be a fleeting thought. You could find yourself one day and lose yourself the very next day. And I think that that's a very real thing. So when it comes down to this topic, building a man from the ground up, I think that men, as we are men, we need to invest in our young men, invest in them. And as we started this episode out with what we believe is the recipe on making a man, I think that that is very true. There's a need for that. Now, for me, for Mike, my foundation is coming out of my Bible. And it's coming out of my experiences as I've tried the words inside of the Bible, as I've tried them in my own life and the things that I've learned. And so those are the sprinkles of salt, of sugar,
Yeah.
of grain, of whatever it is to bake this cake, whatever it is. You know, if I feel like I need to put some jalapeno up in there, some ghost peppers in there because I want my young man to be, you know, a little bit spicy, or if I feel like I need to put some meat inside there because I want him to present with more strength, that's my job. I am the cook right now. He's underneath my powers until he comes to the time and point where he's making decisions on his own, which we alluded to. At that age of 12 or 13, they're starting to make their own decisions, and they may be rejecting the ingredients that we are putting inside of them, or they may be accepting them. But did we set them up for the long-term learning? Did we help build the self-esteem inside of them so they can have the confidence to be able to make those adjustments as they go along the way? And then for the men who are of our age, for men that are in their 20s, men that are in their 30s, men that are in their 40s or 50s, or whoever it is who may still be searching for themselves. If we are like a computer screen when you click on something and the circle just continues to circle around and we're sitting back waiting, trying to figure out when that program is going to upload, I'd advise you, maybe it's just time to reset the computer. Maybe it's time to reset and reboot. Maybe the thing you're attempting to download is not wanted inside of your system. Maybe it's time for you to go on a vacation or a separation. Maybe it's time to go in deeper meditation. Maybe it's time for prayer. Maybe it's time to lay off of outside sources, shut the TV off, shut the radio off, shut the record off, whatever it is. Maybe it's time to get one with self and hash it out with your old man, because the old man may be playing the record of what you used to believe, and that does not align with yourself. The brother said it before. Maybe there's a misalignment inside of yourself. And what happens, I believe, is people get so busy attempting to be everything that they believe is good out there that they don't even realize that the things that they are attempting to be are at cross with each other. They don't even align. So when we bring this from him and this from him and we bring it into ourselves, they misalign. What do you think is happening inside of us? That is a nasty cake we're baking. Nobody wants to eat a piece of that. And sometimes I feel like we can tell because nobody wants to be around us. Nobody wants to sit down and socialize with us. Nobody, they look at us like, he's too fake. He's too, and maybe this is an outward thought process that we don't need to listen to. But sometimes when people, when multiple perspectives are pointing in the same direction, sometimes we need to actually consider, who am I? I'm not saying that we need to agree, because many a time people are projecting their own madness on us. So I'm not saying we need to agree simply because somebody else says this, that, or the other. But sometimes if I go over here to X group and X group feels a certain way when I walk in the room, then I go over here to Y group and Y group feels the same way that X group feels. And then I go over here to Z group and Z group feels the same way that X and Y feels. Maybe, I'm just saying, maybe I ought to go home and start to think, am I doing something that is causing the majority of the people to feel the exact same way about me when I feel like that is a misalignment of who I am? Am I projecting something that I cannot see? Because everybody on the inside sees something different on the outside because their view is skewed. But everybody on the outside also sees something different, because though they can see everything on the outside, when they're looking through that little window, their view is skewed. So whatever I'm projecting out of my inside lacks the ability to see the things on the outside. And whatever somebody is projecting as they look through this small hole lacks the ability of seeing everything that's on the inside. They don't know what you're going through, just like you don't know all of the possibilities. So maybe it's time to try another way, to think a little differently, and to take true consideration. Who am I?
Yeah. That was the question we asked you to ask, that we asked you all to answer the last time we had the last conversation. We ended it with asking, who am I? This is, you probably didn't figure it out. For most people, it's going to take more than a week. So you probably didn't figure out. But guess what? I'm going to add a couple more questions for you all to figure out for the next time as well. Just a couple of questions. I think I heard someone said it's better to ask a better it's better to ask a better question than give an easy answer. So let's not concentrate on the easy answer. Let's just keep asking these questions. I got two. I don't know if the brother got any more, but I got two. So you got, in addition to, who am I? Keep brothers journal about that. Who am I? Keep answering that question with the light of the information that you've received today. So now you got some more information. You got some more perspective, or different perspectives possibly. Answer that question. We kind of just touched on pathology and narratives and blah blah blah, how we got to where we are now. Take that, ask yourself that question. Who am I? Number two, who modeled your view? Who who is modeling your view, or who modeled your view? I heard that question today, and automatically my mind went to the water boy. Remember the water boy kept saying, "Mama said, Mama said, Mama said, Mama said." For some of y'all, is Grandma said, Grandma said, Grandma said. For some of y'all, Grandpa said, Grandpa said. For some of y'all, Daddy said, Daddy said. Uncle said, Uncle said. Whatever. Just, I'm not telling you whether it's right or wrong. I'm just asking you to ask yourself, who modeled your view. And my last one question is really surrounding values. Your value, doing a value elicitation. Figure out like what your values are. What are your values? Come up with 5, no more than 10. Right? Try to get to about 5. What do I value? What's a good way to value? Look up what are values. Look that up. I gave you a couple. I said compassion is one. You're gonna have trust as another one. Those are some higher level values. Start to think about those things. You don't have to come. This is not, by the end of this, you need to have it. Oh, next week, this is homework Mike gave me. This is homework that you're gonna do for the rest of your life. Because what did I say last time, brother? I heard a brother say that you got to be 70 before you even start to really grasp it. So whatever age you are now, all the experiences you had, the questions, who am I? Who modeled or who helped to model my view? Maybe it was a mixture of all these people. Just know, it's just an awareness. And number 3 for me is, what do you value? What are your values? Come up with 5 to 10 of them, and then we can, that's just a basis of it. What about you, brother? Any questions you think they should ask themselves? Or
I love all of those. I don't want to add too much because you gave 3. If I
my
could
bad.
add any,
My
I'd
bad.
add
My
1.
fault.
What is your belief?
What is your belief?
That's it. What do you believe, or what do you believe is true? From a man's perspective on self, your self-belief. What do you believe is true? And whatever comes to your mind, brothers, well, it's not some type of thing where you got to figure out where is he coming from? What does he mean by that? No, it's ambiguous because it requires thought. And that means that nobody's answer will be the same. There's no direction in that because it's an opportunity to find whatever it is that you need.
That's something too. I want you all to pay attention to that. Those things where you believe someone has like some type of ulterior motive of making you do something. That is a part of post traumatic stress disorder. That's
Hmm.
PTSD. You remember? I remember it was a long time. I had to reverse into parking spaces. Every parking spot I went to, I was reversing in. I didn't go directly home. I drove around the block a couple of times. Listen, it's something to take a look at. Everybody, there's no right, especially in this. Like, there's no right or wrong answer. Just start to become aware of these different things. Other than that, this is time well spent. The brother dropped some jewels the last 15 minutes. I hope you all caught some of that stuff. This
Man,
is
you brought jewels the entire show.
this,
So,
this is
man, I
like
was enjoying you. I got notes over here. So,
uh,
let's go. We're doing it.
yeah. Love it. So, guys, we love you. This is a labor of love. We appreciate you. We thank you. Engage, comments, questions. Maybe you got a question. Maybe there's a different perspective. Put it in the comments. DM us. Let us know. Remember the gathering. Till next week. Peace.